Hey everybody, I'm going to give a few moments here to let people join in before I get started. All right, it's 1 after the hour. Welcome everybody, my name is Matt. I'm going to be hosting today's Daily Lunch and Learn. If you are new to Lunch and Learn, it is a place to come have your decisions questions, place for you to ask your decisions questions, and I do my best to respond. We have these meetings Monday through Thursday at noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time. For me, I'm in Arizona, so it's actually 10 a.m. If you've got questions that you want to ask, you can use the Zoom raise hand feature and I can unmute you. Alternatively, you could type out the question through the question and answer box on Zoom as well, and I will read out the question and do my best to respond, or you can type into the chat box if you'd prefer to do that. And I will read that and try to respond to it. So I've got my first question coming in through the question and answer box, and it's from Jeremy. It says, I'm looking at form tiles, and the documentation says they can be used to filter a report on a page. How is that done? The documentation did not go into the setup. Sure, I think I can respond to that. So I'm just going to go over to my local decisions install and set up a form tile on a page. So I'm just going to create a page real quick to test with. Page with a form tile. I'm just going to add the form tile to this left cell in my grid. I'm going to create a new one just so I can demonstrate how this would be done. Okay, so that's the form setup for my form tile. Bear with me here for a second. So I think I need to set up some input data. Okay. Let me also get a report on this because we want to use the form tile to filter that report on this page. So I'm going to add that report to the right here. And I'm going to just create a report of accounts. Those are usually pretty easy to use as an example because there's always accounts in decisions. And I can easily filter something on there. So I'm going to use the account data source. I'm going to have the ID. And I'll go ahead and put the first name in there. just to keep getting to keep going through the setup, I'm going to add that page to a folder so that I can actually look at what the page will look like when I've applied that to a folder. I'm going to call that folder form tile page. I'm going to quickly go in and add that page. Okay, I need to save the page. I'm going to go back to my tab that has this on there so I can see my form tile on the left and the report viewer on the right. I think I was wrong about needing an input here. I'm kind of winging this if you couldn't tell. I actually haven't used the form tile to filter a report, but I suspect I have an idea of how this is done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use an active form flow on this form tile. That's going to send that that filter selection bus to that report. So I know I'm going to need an event button on this somewhere to trigger that. In your example, you may trigger this with something else on the form, like maybe it's a selection and a drop down. For this demonstration, I'm just going to use a raise event button. To trigger that active form flow. All right, and I'm going to call this active form flow filter the report. And it's triggered on the click of that event button. So generally, when you're filtering a report using a flow, the step to use there is set dashboard report parameters. This step is the way to configure, I'm trying to filter the account by its first name or something like that. In this case, I'm going to do first name. So the name I'm looking for when I add the parameter to this step is going to be the same name as the filter on that report. I haven't created that filter on the report yet, but when I do, I'm going to call it first name equals, and I'm sending a string value into that filter. For simplicity, I'm just always going to filter to a single name, and I'm going to just pick Tim. So in this case, this is going to be a constant. On your form, you could, if you're selecting something in a drop down or typing something in, that could be an input to this active form flow. Like I said, for simplicity, I'm just setting that to a constant just to prove that this would work. And I'm going to type in Tim. So this is where I'm not 100% confident on how this is going to be done. So if anybody on the panelist side of this meeting has a correction for me, let me know. I need to pass in the folder ID of essentially this page. I guess right now, I know that the folder ID is this. I'm going to set this as a constant, but if this were to be dynamic, I'm not sure how that would be done. For now, I'm going to put in this constant folder ID, because I know every time, this report and this form tile are loading, it's at the same static folder. I guess the question would be, if this folder were changing, if we're looking at a report that's on, a folder extension or something like that, there may be some other method to get that folder ID in there. But just to see if I'm on the right track, I'm going to set this as a constant for now and paste that in to my set dashboard report parameter step. I think that's all I'm going to need in this active form flow for now, just to test if this is even the right approach. Again, that's going to run when I click the event button. So very simple. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save that. And then the other thing I need to do before I can test this is, like I said, I need to actually set up this report so that it's listening for that filter. So I'm going to add a filter, and it's going to be an entity filter, sorry, a field filter. And it's going to be for the first name. First name equals. Now I need to update the name of this filter to match exactly what I called it on that set dashboard report step. And that was first name equals without spaces. So I'm taking out the spaces, and I'm setting up this filter to listen for a value coming in. And the way you set that is you set it to the runtime behavior to get values from other reports. If it's not runtime editable, you only can set one static value, and that's what it's always going to filter to. But get value from other reports configures this report to listen, for that filter change event. I'm going to set this to show all when there's no value, because I just want to see when I first load this page, what I'm expecting is that all of the accounts are going to show up in my report viewer on the right-hand side. When I click this event button, it should, if I've set this up correctly, filter out everything except for where the first name is Tim. Okay, so that, I'm glad that worked. Now I feel confident in saying that if you're using a form tile, the way to go about it is use a active form flow. And in that active form flow, the step you're looking for is set dashboard report parameters. Jeremy, I want to know are you using this form tile on a page that has a dynamic folder ID? I think that's the one thing you may run into.
No, it'll be static.
Okay, perfect.
It's just going to be like a dashboard giving somebody information. I want to have them to be able to more visually pleasingly filter than having to click on the filter menu on the form.
Got it. So yeah,
they give them multiple options to filter as well.
So you'll have a more complex set of active form flows, or your single active form flow may be more complicated than my example, but
yeah, but that does work.
Here,
I did walk along with you and do that, and it does work on mine as well. So
good. Yeah, this is a good setup because then you can have your form control all the filters on the report, and like you said, that gives the user a lot more flexibility and possibly a better user experience than just the default report filters.
Yeah, that definitely does satisfy my question. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for asking, Jeremy. If anybody else on the Lunch and Learn has a question, now's a good time to ask it. Like I said, you could either raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you can ask it live, or you can type it out into the question and answer box or the chat. As we're waiting for that, I don't have any current questions coming in, so I'm going to move forward with killing some time on a personal project of mine. Please feel free to interrupt whatever I'm doing with your questions. What I'm doing now is I've been trying to build this calculator out. When we have new hires start it used to be, I don't think we do this anymore, but in the past, one of the first things they would build in decisions is a calculator. They use a form and either a flow or a active form flow to make that calculator actually run in decisions. And it's for people who are just starting, and so their calculators are really basic. When I did this, my calculator was incredibly basic, and I think it really it didn't look like a calculator. You'd just type out the numbers on the form and hit a button, and then it would show the result. What I wanted to do was see if I could build out in decisions a more not an advanced calculator, but something that was interesting to me. I wanted to build it out as a TI 108, which is one of those like really old basic 4-function calculators that you'd use in elementary school. And hang on, my mouse stopped working. There we go. It looked like this. I wanted it so that you could actually click the buttons on the form and see the results on here. I started building this. It's actually it's actually more complicated than I thought. As I've been thinking about how this calculator operates, I've found it to be pretty well designed. I mean, it's pretty intuitive to use. Maybe that's just because I grew up using it in elementary school, but with just a single screen, a single display that can only display one number at a time, it's pretty intuitively able to do these functions here. I'm focusing on just these 4 simple add, subtract, etc. functions, but I wanted a form and decisions to match that exactly. I have a start of that over here in my calculator project folder. And really basic, I just have the buttons on there. I've only got 1 and 2 right now just to test the concept. I'm kind of prototyping how that would work. But I thought through how addition could potentially work. So I have this sequence written out here. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to try to get started on this and how I'd actually build this sequence, this addition happy path sequence using an active form flow. Please, if you have questions, interrupt what I'm doing. I want to answer your questions and not just talk about this random calculator. This is fun for me, but I think it's more important that you're getting your questions answered. So feel free to interrupt. All right, so the happy path here that I want to build out is a user is going to press a number, like 1. The user presses the addition button, and when they click the addition button, the calculator is going to cache that number that they entered, and it's going to cache the operation button that they selected. So it's going to cache if I typed 1 and then the plus, it'll store those 2 things, and the calculator will then clear the screen. Because if I'm recalling correctly, that's what these calculators would do. At that point, the user is expected to enter in a second number. They can type in any number they want and then hit the equals button. From there, what I know the calculator is going to have to do is pull from cache that operation that they selected and that first number, perform the operation, and then display the result. That's something I think I can do with an active form flow. It's just a happy path for now. Certainly, a user could press any other button instead of equals at step 7, but I don't want to worry about those alternative paths right now. So let me start with this. What I'd like to get done here with my first active form flow is just caching the number and the operation. So I'm going to open up that form, and I'm going to take a look at the active form flow that I want to do this. I already have an active form flow that is responsible for populating the 1 button and the 2 button. So I need to modify this plus button because that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. We need to cache the first number and cache the operation. So my plus button, I'm going to edit this. My original approach to this was to have a hidden text box on the calculator to store like those operations. I think it's a little clunky. I want to not do the hidden text box at all. I want to use our cache steps to make this work a little better. I'm actually going to take all of these steps out. That was my old approach. I'm starting a new approach, so I want a fresh start here. All right, so going to look for our cache steps. The first thing I want to do is cache that number. So put in cache, I believe is the step that I want. I'm going to keep it simple for now. And not to worry too much about the key or like multiple users on the same calculator. So my key can simply be current operator. The cache type name, I'm just going to refer to our documentation real quick on cache steps to make sure I put the right value in there. I'm just going to look. So in this example, we've got admin email, store email cache for the instance name. And it looks like I need to set up this cache first. So I'm going to go do that in my system folder. System, and then I believe it's in designers, but let me go refer back to the documentation. It's administration cache, okay. Cache. Okay, I'm going to use just a default cache here. And I'm going to go with the default memory cache. I think that'll work. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change my goal for today. I'm simply going to see how cache works. I'm going to test that out. I want to make sure if I put something in here that I can retrieve it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new flow in my calculator project just to make sure I'm understanding the cache properly. And that'll make my my work a lot easier when I actually go in to use those cache steps for my calculator. So I'm going to have two steps. I'm going to have a put in cache and then a get from cache. Not a list step, but just a single value. And of course, if you've got any questions, just interrupt me. I'm still keeping an eye on the chat and the question and answer box. All right, so the cache instance name. Looks like this is going to be where I copied my default memory cache. The cache type name. In this example, it was admin emails. I think that, okay, never mind. That is the configuration name that I'm supposed to use. So then the type name, or sorry, instance name. I'm not totally sure what that's going to be. I'm going to just put both as default memory cache for now and see what happens. The key, I'm just going to call that operator for now, and then the value, I'm going to put plus because in my actual calculator, that's what I would expect. That's one possibility I would expect to put in the cache is that plus sign. So get from cache. Same thing. I'm going to put in these two default memory cache options. And then the key, I know that this has to be the same key that I used in my put in cache. And I'm expecting my string output should be that plus sign. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to debug it and see probably that I did something wrong. So input to this looks good. This is everything I typed in. These are all constants, no surprises there. And I'm going to look, if I did it right, the output should be that plus. Okay, good. All right, so I am actually using that correctly. Well, it at least worked. I don't want to say that I'm using it 100% correctly. So back on my actual flow here, I'm going to have my default memory cache be the instance name as well as the cache type name. I have a feeling, I think that this cache type name probably could be anything, just like the key could be anything. In this flow, though, it's not going to be a constant. I'm actually going to pass in the, I need to know what button was pressed, actually. So this is specifically this plus button form flow. Actually, I will make this constant because this is the flow that's going to run only when I press plus. I'm going to copy that put in cache step and paste it so that I have another one to put in the value. Put operator in cache is this first step. The next one is going to be put value in cache. So current value is going to be the name of this key. And then this one is actually to be select from flow. It's going to be form data, sorry, not form input data, but form data. And then I have my calculator screen text box, and it's going to be the value of that text box. One other thing that I need this flow to do is clear the calculator screen. So I'm going to do that with a form rule. I'm going to do a set control value step. And I'm going to set the value of that screen. So calculator screen text box. I don't think I actually need to pick value here, but once I pick that, now the value is an input, and I want that to be constant. I want it to be empty. It can't be null. I'm going to set it to ignore, and I think that's going to clear the screen. All right, I'm going to test this. I want to see if this is, at least up to this point, running those cache steps and clearing the screen. So run calculator form, run flow. I'm going to just put 12. When I hit plus, the only thing I'm going to see that's happening here is that the screen's going to disappear. It's not. Let me run this in the debugger. So I can see what's going on. 1 and then plus. So my plus button form flow, I guess the ignore here is not, it doesn't like that. To test that, see if that really is the problem, I'm going to go open up that form. And instead of doing ignore on there, I'm going to, I'm just going to put a 0. If this shows 0, then I know that the ignore there was a problem and I need to figure out another way to set it to an empty string. If it doesn't work, then I've got some other problem going on. So I'm going to create a new session, close that. Start debugging 1 plus, yeah, okay, so set that back to 0. All right. And I can see in the debugger, my put in cache steps didn't throw an error. So presumably they're in there. I think at a later date, I'm going to test to make sure that those actually did make it in there. But I don't see any other questions either in the question and answer box. The chat has nothing in it, and there's no hands raised. So this, to me, I think this is a good stopping point. I appreciate everybody for hopping on this. Thanks, and I hope to see you again on another Lunch and Learn in the future. Take care, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.